I did not flinch. I did not reach for my purse. I set my wine glass down on the white linen tablecloth and watched the tiny tremble in Vera Delgado's left hand as she slid the bill across the table. The paper made a soft, deliberate scrape against the fabric, like a blade being drawn. "You owe us for every meal we've ever given you." Her voice carried through Bianch's dining room like a song she had rehearsed for years. The chandeliers above us cast warm yellow light onto her silver hair and the sharp points of her collarbone. She wore a cream silk blouse with gold buttons, the collar starched stiff, and her eyes never left mine. They were the same shade of cold green as the olives in the martini she had ordered and barely touched. "My name is Catherine Hale. I am 38 years old. In the past 12 months alone, I have recovered $2.3 million in hidden marital assets for clients across 3 counties. My case closure rate as a certified fraud examiner stands at 94%. I know the precise weight of silence. I know how to read the micro-expressions of someone who believes they hold all the cards. And I knew, in that moment, that Vera Delgado had no idea who she was dealing with. I did not look at Harold, her husband, who sat to her right with his jaw set and his eyes fixed on the condensation on his water glass. I did not look at Trevor, her son, who sprawled in his chair with the practiced entitlement of a man who had never been told no. I looked only at Vera. I let the silence stretch for a count of 4. Then I reached into the pocket of my coat, a simple black wool coat I had bought 4 years ago, the same one I wore to Liam's funeral, and pulled out his old iPhone 12. The screen was dark. The case was scuffed at the corners, it weighed nothing, but in that moment it contained the entire architecture of my life for the past 6 months. I placed it on the table beside the bill, face up. "I'll take care of the bill," I said, my voice even. "But first, I'd like you to hear something." Vera's smile flickered. Harold shifted in his seat. Trevor straightened, suddenly wary. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up. I tapped the saved voicemail folder, scrolled to the file labeled November 15, 2024, Judge Linda Okonkwo, and pressed play. The judge's voice, calm and official, filled the space around us. "This message is to confirm that the request for a domestic violence protective order filed by Catherine Hale against Vera Delgado, Harold Delgado, and Trevor Delgado has been granted. The order is effective immediately. Any further demands for payment, harassment, or contact from the named parties will constitute contempt of court under Family Code Section 6320, punishable by arrest and restitution. The order will be served by the Sheriff's Department within 24 hours. The silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut. I raised my wine glass. "To family." The restaurant manager appeared at my elbow, his face carefully neutral. Behind me, through the tall front windows, a sheriff's car pulled into the parking lot, its lights cutting through the December dusk in slow, patient pulses. I took a slow sip of my wine. The wine was a Sangiovese, full-bodied, with notes of black cherry and leather. I did not look at them as the sheriff stepped inside. I did not watch as they were escorted out, their forks still resting on untouched plates of ossobuco and linguine. But I heard Vera's voice one last time, muffled and shrill, as the handcuffs clicked closed. "You'll regret this, Catherine." I wiped the corner of my mouth with the linen napkin and said nothing. "If you are listening from a city where you have ever sat at a table with people who made you feel small, tell me where you are. I want to know that I am not alone in this. Now, let me take you back to how this nightmare started. Let me take you back to the first time I realized that my in-laws had never seen me as family. They had seen me as an expense. I met Liam Delgado 10 years ago at a conference on forensic accounting in San Diego. He was a claims adjuster for a major insurance firm, and he was the kindest man I have ever known. He had a smile that erased the distance between strangers and a way of listening that made you feel heard down to your marrow. We married 15 months later in a small ceremony at a courthouse because neither of us wanted to spend money on anything that didn't feel necessary. His family did not attend. Vera sent a card. Harold sent an email. Trevor sent nothing. I told myself it did not matter. I had grown up in a household where love was measured in the absence of cruelty, so the absence of hostility felt almost like affection. But I was wrong. The hostility was there, it was just wrapped in silk and served over a 4-course meal. The first time I met them was at a Sunday dinner at their home in the suburbs of Los Angeles. A colonial revival with a manicured lawn, a rose garden that Vera maintained with the same precision she applied to her grievances, and hardwood floors that creaked in exactly the places you would expect. Liam had warned me that they were formal. He had not warned me that they were auditors. The dining table was set with china that matched the curtains. Vera sat at the head, Harold at the foot, Trevor to Liam's left. I sat across from Trevor, next to a crystal vase of white roses that smelled like a funeral home. Over rubbery chicken and undercooked green beans, Vera asked about my work. Forensic accounting, she repeated, as if tasting something bitter. So you dig through people's financial garbage. I help people find what's been hidden, I said. Assets, debts, patterns. It's like assembling a puzzle where half the pieces are missing. Harold grunted. Sounds like a lot of busy work. Trevor laughed. Bet you're good at finding spare change and couch cushions. I smiled. I kept that smile through the rest of the meal, through the apple tart that tasted like cinnamon and spite, through the moment Vera asked me to help with the dishes and then corrected my technique for drying a wine glass. You should hold it by the stem, Catherine. You don't want to leave prints on the bowl. I held my tongue. I dried the glass with the softest cloth I could find and set it back in the cabinet exactly where she wanted it. That was the pattern. For 5 years, I became their invisible fixer. I did not tell them I had caught an error in their mortgage refinancing documents that would have cost them $18,000 in unnecessary fees. I simply called the bank and had it corrected. I did not tell them that I had identified a pattern of overpayment on their property taxes dating back 3 years, totaling nearly $7,000 in refunds. I just filed the paperwork and let the checks arrive anonymously. I did not tell them that when Harold's small business was audited by the IRS, I spent a weekend reconstructing his receipts and discovered $47,000 in overlooked medical deductions that saved them from a $12,000 penalty and a potential fraud inquiry. I submitted the amended return through a tax preparer I knew and let them think it was a stroke of luck. I did it because Liam asked me to. Because he loved them in the same broken, hopeful way a child loves a parent who withholds warmth. He believed that if they just saw how good I was, how useful, how quietly essential, they would eventually open the door. They never opened the door. They just kept the porch light on so I could see them locking it. By the 4th year, I had cataloged their behaviors like line items in a ledger. Harold's verbal tick. You're nothing but a leech on this family. He said it at least twice a year, usually after Liam had mentioned a promotion I had received or a case I had closed. It was not anger. It was a reflex, a way of restoring a hierarchy he believed I had violated. Trevor's verbal tick. Just pay up, Catherine, and we'll all move on. This one appeared every time a shared expense was divided. A birthday dinner, a holiday weekend at a rental cabin, a group gift for a cousin's wedding. Trevor never paid his share. He simply assumed that I would cover the difference, and when I did not, he turned it into a moral failing on my part. Vera's verbal tick was the most precise, the most practiced, the most surgical. You owe us for every meal we've ever given you. She said it first at a dinner in early 2022, when Liam and I had invited them to a restaurant to celebrate his 35th birthday. The check arrived, Vera looked at it, and then she looked at me. I think you should get this one, Catherine. After all, you owe us for every meal we've ever given you. I paid it. I paid it because it was his birthday, and I did not want to make a scene. I paid it because I was still trying to earn a seat at a table that had no empty chairs. The bill that night was $230. I remember because I wrote it down in the notebook I kept in my nightstand. I wrote down every amount they demanded, every dinner, every supposed debt, every implied obligation. By the time Liam died, the total was $48,600, exactly the amount they would later demand in a single check. Liam died in September of last year. A heart attack, sudden, no warning. He was 41. He had been healthy, or so we thought. He had gone for a run that morning, come home, made coffee, sat down on the sofa, and was gone before he hit the cushions. The funeral was 3 days later. Vera wore black, of course, and a veil, and she wept with the kind of theatrical precision that made me want to scream. Harold stood beside her, stone-faced. Trevor did not come. He was too broken up, according to Vera. I stood at the graveside with my hands clasped in front of me, wearing the same coat I wear now, and I did not cry. Not because I was not broken, but because I had learned in 38 years that tears are a resource you do not waste on people who will use them against you. The day after the funeral, I was at home, alone, sorting through Liam's things. His desk, his closet, his phone. That was when I found the voicemail. It was in the deleted messages folder. A message from Vera, left on Liam's phone at 10:47 in the evening, the day after the funeral. The timestamp was clear. I have it saved still. I will never delete it. Liam, it's your mother. I know you can't hear this, but I need to say it. Harold and I have been thinking about the life insurance policy. That $500,000 is not going to her. She abandoned you long before you died. We can find a way to prove that. I have a friend who can help us with the paperwork. You would understand. You always understood. We'll take care of everything. Don't worry. I listened to it 7 times. I saved it to a secure folder. I made 3 copies, and I began to document everything. I cataloged every text message, every email, every demand for payment. I recorded every phone call that was legally permissible under California's 2-party consent laws, which, as it turned out, Vera often called me from a blocked number, which meant I could record my calls with her without her knowledge, since I was a party to the conversation. I did nothing illegal. I simply created an evidentiary chain so complete that a first-year law student could have built a contempt case. That was when I reached out to Julian Torres, a family law attorney I had worked with on a previous case. He specialized in protective orders and contempt hearings. He was the kind of lawyer who did not flinch at complicated evidence. He filed the sealed protective order without any fanfare. He authenticated the voicemail with a forensic audio expert, and he waited. I waited too. For 6 months, I tracked every demand, every threat, every attempted shakedown. The total reached $48,600, the same number they would later write on a check they tried to force me to endorse. But that Friday night at Bynch's, before the sheriff arrived, before the contempt hearing was set for Monday, before Vera's cream silk blouse was photographed in a mugshot that would circulate through every family group chat, I was sitting across from them, listening to the judge's recorded voice, and I knew that I had won not because I was louder, not because I was crueler, but because I was more prepared. Liam's final words to me, spoken 3 weeks before he died, were this: "Don't let them take your peace, Kat. Let the law speak for you." I kept that voicemail too, and I was about to let the law do exactly what it was designed to do. But that was later. That was the ending. The beginning, the real beginning, was a single piece of paper slid across a table at Bynch's, with a number written on it in fountain pen and a voice that said, "You owe us for every meal we've ever given you." I had no idea then that the number on that paper was a mirror, a perfect, inverted reflection of the debt they had incurred in silence. I had no idea that I had already prepared my own invoice. I had no idea that, by Monday morning, they would understand exactly what it meant to owe a forensic accountant nothing at all. I arrived at Bynch's at 7:32 in the evening, 12 minutes early, because punctuality is a form of control that costs nothing. The restaurant sat on a corner of Wilshire Boulevard, its facade a careful restoration of Italianate architecture from the 1920s, with wrought iron sconces and a sign in gold script that promised Cucina Authentica. I had been there once before, with Liam, for our 5th anniversary. We had split a bottle of Barolo and a plate of squid ink pasta, and laughed about the time his mother tried to renegotiate the price of a used car after the sale was final. That memory lived in a different part of my chest now, sealed off, catalogued. I stepped out of my sedan, a 4-year-old Honda with a dent in the rear bumper that I never bothered to fix, and walked to the entrance. The December air carried the scent of wet pavement and wood smoke from a nearby fireplace. I wore the same black wool coat, but beneath it I had chosen a burgundy silk blouse, high-waisted trousers, and a pair of low heels that made no sound on the cobblestones. I had dressed for myself, not for them. The hostess greeted me with a smile that faded when she saw my name on the reservation. "Ah, yes, the Delgado party? Your table is in the back, near the kitchen." I did not take that as an accident. Vera always chose the table near the kitchen. It meant the waitstaff would pass us constantly, that any conversation would be shadowed by the sounds of clattering plates and steaming pans. It meant she could watch the chefs and comment on their technique. It meant she was in command of the space. I followed the hostess through the dining room. The chandeliers cast warm yellow light onto white linen tablecloths. The walls were painted a muted terracotta, hung with framed photographs of Italian villas and olive groves. The carpet was a deep burgundy, thick enough to muffle footsteps. The room hummed with the low murmur of conversations, the clink of glassware, the occasional burst of laughter from a table near the bar. The Delgado table was at the far end, in a corner booth partially obscured by a half wall topped with potted ferns. Vera sat on the outer edge, facing the room. Harold sat across from her, his back to the wall. Trevor was slouched on the inside bench, scrolling through his phone. They were all dressed for performance. Vera wore a cream silk blouse with gold buttons, a strand of pearls, and earrings that caught the light whenever she tilted her head. Harold wore a navy blazer with a pocket square, even though the restaurant did not require a jacket. Trevor wore a designer hoodie under a leather jacket, the hood strings dangling loose, a deliberate gesture of indifference that required exactly as much effort as dressing up. They looked like a tableau of unity. Three people who shared the same angle of jaw, the same shade of dark hair, the same way of holding their wine glasses by the stem. I read the room the way I read a financial statement, line by line, looking for the hidden liabilities. Vera's posture was too straight. Her left hand rested on the tablecloth, palm flat, fingers spread wide, a gesture of openness that was actually a territorial claim. She had placed her napkin on the table, not on her lap, a signal that she was waiting for me to arrive before the meal could begin. She wanted me to see that I was the one delaying their pleasure. Harold's eyes were fixed on his water glass. He was not looking at me. He never looked at me directly when Vera was speaking. His silence was a vote. Trevor had not looked up from his phone. His thumb moved in slow, deliberate swipes. He was scrolling Instagram. I could see the reflection of a video in his eyes. I approached the table. I did not rush. "Catherine," Vera said. Her voice was warm. The warmth was a weapon. "So good of you to join us. We were beginning to worry." "Traffic," I said. I did not offer to shake hands. I slid into the booth across from Trevor, next to Harold, who shifted his weight away from me by half an inch. The hostess handed me a menu. I did not open it. I already knew what I would order. The Branzino, because it was the least likely to be oversalted, and a glass of the Sangiovese. Vera ordered for the table without consulting me. She always did. She chose a bottle of Barolo, the same one Liam and I had shared on our anniversary. I did not mention it. I did not react. We ordered. The food arrived. The conversation was a series of carefully aimed jabs. Vera asked about my work. I told her I was handling a complex marital asset case involving a real estate developer who had hidden 3 properties in a trust in the Cayman Islands. "Sounds tedious," she said. "It's methodical," I replied. "Most people don't hide money well. They just hide it with enough confidence that no one bothers to look." Harold snorted into his wine. Trevor set down his phone. "So you just, find rich people's secret bank accounts?" "Sometimes," I said. "Sometimes I find debts they're trying to avoid paying. Sometimes I find gifts they're trying to reclaim. It depends on the pattern." Vera's eyes narrowed. She caught the edge in my voice, but she could not place it. The meal stretched. The pasta came, the fish came, the wine was poured and poured again. I ate slowly. I drank sparingly. I watched. Trevor talked about a startup he was consulting for that seemed to consist of a poorly designed website and a series of lunches with investors who never committed. Harold talked about his golf game, which had apparently improved by 3 strokes since the summer. Vera talked about the rose garden, the neighbor's lawsuit over a shared fence, the upcoming holiday party at the country club, which I was not invited to, delivered in a tone of such casual dismissal that it took me a full second to register the exclusion. "Oh, it's just close family and a few friends," Vera said. "You understand." I understood. I had been understanding for 7 years. Then the plates were cleared. The espresso was served. And Vera reached into her handbag, a structured leather tote in a shade of beige that cost more than my monthly rent, and pulled out the bill. It was printed on By&Ch's letterhead, a crisp white rectangle. She laid it on the table with the precision of a dealer placing a card. The number at the bottom, written in fine print, was $486. She pushed it across the linen until it rested in front of me. I looked at it. I did not touch it. And then Vera leaned forward, her lips parted in a smile that had no warmth, and said the words I had been waiting to hear. "You owe us for every meal we've ever given you." The room did not go silent. The room continued its low hum of forks and conversation because the sound of her voice did not carry beyond our booth. But the air around our table seemed to compress, to grow heavier. I did not flinch. I did not look away. I set my wine glass down and noticed the slight, desperate twitch in her left eyelid. She believed she had won. She believed that this was the moment I would finally break, that I would reach into my purse, pull out a credit card, and pay for the meal in silence as I had done so many times before. And they thought that was the ending. But I had been preparing for this moment for 6 months. I let the silence stretch long enough to make her smile falter. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out Liam's old iPhone 12. The screen was dark. The case was scuffed at the corners. I placed it on the table beside the bill, face up. "I'll take care of the bill," I said. "But first, I'd like you to hear something." Vera's smile flickered. Harold shifted in his seat. Trevor straightened, suddenly wary. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up. I tapped the saved voicemail folder, scrolled to the file labeled November 15, 2024, Judge Linda Okonkwo, and pressed play. The judge's voice filled the space around us, calm and official. "This message is to confirm that the request for a domestic violence protective order filed by Catherine Hale against Vera Delgado, Harold Delgado, and Trevor Delgado has been granted. The order is effective immediately. Any further demands for payment, harassment, or contact from the named parties will constitute contempt of court under Family Code Section 6320, punishable by arrest and restitution. The order will be served by the Sheriff's Department within 24 hours. The silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut. I raised my wine glass. "To family." The restaurant manager appeared at my elbow, his face carefully neutral. Behind me, through the tall front windows, a sheriff's car pulled into the parking lot, its lights cutting through the December dusk in slow, patient pulses. I took a slow sip of my wine. The wine was a Sangiovese, full-bodied, with notes of black cherry and leather. I did not watch them as the sheriff stepped inside. I did not watch as they were escorted out, their forks still resting on untouched plates of ossobuco and linguine. But I heard Vera's voice one last time, muffled and shrill, as the handcuffs clicked closed. "You'll regret this, Catherine." I wiped the corner of my mouth with the linen napkin and said nothing. Then I pulled out my phone, dialed a number I had saved under the name M. Chen Landscaping, and waited for the line to pick up. Margaret Chen answered on the third ring. "Catherine, tell me you did it." "It's done," I said. "The protective order was served. They're in custody. The contempt hearing is set for Monday at 9 in the morning." Margaret let out a breath that sounded like she had been holding it for years. "Good, good. I'll be in the gallery. I already called Judge Okonkwo's clerk. She knows the case. She's not going to tolerate any procedural games." Margaret Chen had been a family court judge for 22 years before she retired. She had presided over more protective order hearings than she could count. She knew every loophole, every delay tactic, every piece of theater that family court attorneys used to drag out cases. She was also the only person in my life who had ever called me after Liam's funeral and said, "If you ever need a judge to review a file, call me. I'll read it on a Sunday." I had called her the week after I found the voicemail. She had spent an hour on the phone with me, walking me through the evidence chain, telling me exactly what I needed to document and how to preserve the metadata on the recordings. "You need to be methodical," she had said. "No outbursts, no emotional pleas, just facts. A clean record will win your case faster than any argument." She was right. I drove home through the dark streets of Los Angeles, the city lights blurring past my window. I did not turn on the radio. I did not call anyone. I sat in the silence and let the adrenaline slowly drain from my body. When I reached my house, I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for 5 minutes, staring at the front door. The rose bushes Liam had planted were bare for the winter, their stems dark and tangled. The porch light was on, controlled by a timer I had set months ago. The house looked the same as it always had, but I felt different. I walked inside, locked the door behind me, and went to my home office. On my desk sat a manila folder. Inside were copies of every piece of evidence I had gathered: text messages, voicemail transcripts, bank records showing the money they had demanded, a notarized copy of the protective order, and a single check. The check was made out to me, from Vera and Harold Delgado, in the amount of $48,600. They had written it in the days after Liam's funeral, with a note in the memo line: "Reimbursement for expenses incurred on behalf of the Delgado family, final settlement." They had intended it as an insult, a bribe, a way to force me to accept their version of what I owed them. I had never cashed it. I had saved it as evidence, but I had also done something else. I had run a financial analysis on Vera and Harold's accounts, going back 7 years. I had calculated every meal I had paid for, every gift I had bought in their name, every debt I had quietly settled. The total was $48,600, the exact amount they had written on the check, a mirror, a perfect inverted reflection. I had never told anyone about that calculation, not Margaret, not Julian. It was my private knowledge, my silent scaffolding. They had tried to buy me off with the exact amount they owed me, and they did not know that I knew. I picked up my phone again. I dialed Julian Torres' number. He answered on the first ring. "Catherine, I saw the sheriff's log. It went through." "It did," I said. "The hearing is Monday at 9. I'll be there with the full evidence packet. The audio certification came back clean. The judge will see everything." "Thank you, Julian." "Don't thank me yet. Monday is the real battle, but you've done the hard part. You documented everything. You didn't give them anything to use against you." I looked at the check on my desk. The ink was dry. The numbers were clear. "I know," I said. I hung up and sat in the dark of my office, the only light coming from the screen of Liam's old iPhone 12, which I had placed on the desk beside the check. I tapped into the saved voicemail folder. I selected the file labeled Liam, October 2024. His voice, warm and tired, filled the small room. "Hey, Kat, it's me. I just wanted to say I love you. I know things have been hard with my parents, but don't let them take your peace. Let the law speak for you. You're the smartest person I know. You'll figure it out. I'll see you tonight." I let the message play to the end. Then I set the phone down, closed the folder, and went to bed. I slept more soundly than I had in months. And in the morning, I began to prepare for Monday. But across town, in a holding cell at the county jail, Vera Delgado was already planning her counterattack. She had been arrested once before in her 20s for a minor fraud charge that was eventually dropped. She knew the system. She knew how to delay, how to obfuscate, how to make the process hurt. She did not know that I had already anticipated every move she would make. She did not know that I had already won. But I did. And that was the only knowledge that mattered. The Saturday morning light came through my bedroom curtains in pale gray stripes, weak and diffuse, the kind of December light that promises nothing. I woke at 6:43 without an alarm, my body adjusted to the rhythm of preparation. I lay still for a moment, feeling the quiet of the house, the absence of footsteps, the silence where Liam's breathing used to be. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood. The first thing I did was open my laptop and log into the secure folder where I kept the evidence. Every document had a date stamp, a file name, a hash value that matched the forensic audit log. I had spent years teaching clients how to build an evidence chain. Now I had built one for myself. At 7:15, I brewed a pot of coffee, black, no sugar, and carried a mug to my home office. The room was small, 12 feet by 10, with a single window that faced the street. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, each drawer labeled by year. I had converted the guest room after Liam died because I needed a space where I could think without the weight of his memory pressing on every surface. On my desk sat the manila folder from the night before. I opened it and reviewed the contents one more time. The protective order, signed by Judge Okonkwo, dated November 15th, with a raised seal that caught the light when I tilted the page. The transcript of Vera's voicemail, timestamped September 28th, 10:47 p.m., the day after Liam's funeral. The bank records showing the pattern of demand payments, $230 here, $412 there, each one matching a meal or event where Vera had publicly insisted I pay. The check for $48,600, written on the joint account of Vera and Harold Delgado, dated October 3rd. I had not yet deposited it. I had not yet cashed it. It existed in a state of legal limbo, an uncashed instrument that proved intent. At 8:02, my phone buzzed. Julian Torres. "Catherine, I'm outside. I have the full forensic audio certification and the notarized copies of the protective order service. Come in." I met him at the front door. Julian was in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair cut short and a face that looked like it had seen every kind of courtroom theater. He wore a charcoal overcoat and carried a leather briefcase that was older than some of the associates in his firm. He stepped inside, stamped his feet on the mat, and followed me to the office. He set the briefcase on my desk, clicked open the locks, and pulled out a stack of documents. "The audio certification came back clean," he said, handing me a report bound in a clear plastic cover. "The expert verified the integrity of the original file. No editing, no splicing. The metadata is consistent with the original recording timestamp. Judge Okonkwo will admit it without objection." I scanned the report. The signature of the forensic audio expert, a woman named Rachel Okonkwo, no relation to the judge, Julian had assured me, was notarized and embossed. The protective order was served on all three parties at 9:47 p.m. last night at the county jail, Julian continued. They each signed acknowledgement. Vera Delgado attempted to refuse service, but the sheriff documented her refusal on the return of service form. He handed me the form. I looked at the signature line for Vera, a jagged line that seemed to cut through the paper. She argued that she couldn't be served while in custody, Julian said. That's not correct procedure. The service is valid. I nodded. What about the contempt hearing? Scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m., Department 2, before Judge Okonkwo. I've already filed the notice of hearing and the supporting declaration with the evidence attached. The court will have the full packet by end of business today. I looked at the stack of documents. 23 pages, single-sided, clipped together in order. The declaration, the protective order, the service return, the voicemail transcript, the audio certification, the bank records, the check. There's something else, I said. Julian looked up. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first. I had been holding this back, waiting for the right moment. I ran a deeper analysis on Vera and Harold's financial records. Going back 10 years, I found something they don't know I found. I opened the folder and spread the contents across the desk. Vera Delgado has a separate checking account at a credit union in Glendale. It's not listed on any of the joint account documents. She opened it 14 years ago, before Harold's business was established. She's been funneling money into it from a variety of sources: cash deposits, transfers from a Shell LLC registered in Nevada, and what appears to be a portion of Harold's business revenue that he never reported. Julian leaned forward, his eyes scanning the pages. I had printed the account statements in miniature, 3 months per page, with handwritten annotations in the margins. The total balance as of last month is approximately $212,000, I said. The account is held in her name only. Harold does not have access. I cross-referenced the deposits with the business tax returns for the past 5 years. The amounts that went into her account match exactly the amounts that were missing from the reported revenue in the years the IRS audited. Julian's jaw tightened. She's been hiding income from the IRS, and from Harold. And she used some of that money to make the payments she demanded from me, I said. The $486 dinner at Bianch's, she paid the restaurant's deposit from that account. I traced the transaction. She used a debit card linked to the Glendale Credit Union. Julian sat back in his chair. Catherine, that's tax evasion. That's wire fraud if she used interstate banking. That's a separate criminal matter entirely. I know, I said. I'm not planning to file that report. Not yet, but I wanted you to know. If she tries to challenge the protective order, if she tries to claim financial hardship or emotional distress, I have this. Julian looked at me for a long moment. You've been holding this for how long? I found it 3 weeks ago. I wanted to be sure before I told anyone. You're sure now? I tapped the statements. I matched the deposit dates to specific events. The week after she demanded I pay for a family reunion dinner at a rented venue in June of last year, she deposited $2,000 into this account. The week after Liam's funeral, she deposited $12,000. She's been using me as a source of liquidity, then hiding the proceeds. Julian shook his head slowly. That's not just domestic abuse. That's financial fraud of a significant scale. I know, I said. But for Monday, I only need the protective order and the contempt evidence. The rest can wait. Julian began collecting the documents, placing them into his briefcase with the care of a surgeon handling instruments. I'll have my paralegal prepare a supplemental declaration in case it becomes relevant. We'll keep it sealed until needed. He paused at the door. Catherine, I've handled a lot of these cases. I've never seen a client prepare this thoroughly. You're going to win on Monday. But you need to be ready for what happens after. Vera Delgado does not strike me as someone who will go quietly. I'm counting on it, I said. After Julian left, I returned to the kitchen and poured a second cup of coffee. The house was quiet. The clock on the microwave read 8:47, and then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from an unknown number. The area code was local. I opened it. This is Trevor. You think you're so smart. My mom is going to destroy you in court. You have no idea what you've started. I stared at the message for a moment. Then I took a screenshot and saved it to the evidence folder. I did not respond. 20 minutes later, another message. This time from a number I recognized, Harold's cell. Catherine, please reconsider. This is not good for anyone. We can settle this privately. Just drop the order and we'll forget the whole thing. I took another screenshot. At 9:30, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Vera's home number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. Catherine, it's Vera. I know you're listening. You think you've won, but you don't understand the system like I do. I know judges, I know lawyers, I know how to make things disappear. You're a fool if you think this will end on Monday. I saved the voicemail. I added it to the folder. I did not feel anger. I did not feel fear. I felt the quiet satisfaction of a trap refining itself. Every threat they sent, every attempt to intimidate, every moment of arrogance was another piece of evidence that confirmed the pattern. They could not stop themselves. They had spent so many years believing they were untouchable that they had forgotten how to be careful. I spent the rest of Saturday reviewing the evidence one more time. I read the transcript of Vera's voicemail aloud, slowly, listening to the cadence of her words. I timed the pauses. I noted the inflection points. Liam, it's your mother. I know you can't hear this, but I need to say it. Harold and I have been thinking about the life insurance policy. That $500,000 is not going to her. She abandoned you long before you died. We can find a way to prove that. I have a friend who can help us with the paperwork. You would understand. You always understood. We'll take care of everything. Don't worry. The word friend was a lie. The word paperwork was a euphemism. The phrase take care of everything was a confession. I wondered what friend she had recruited. A notary, perhaps. An attorney willing to look the other way. Someone who owed her a favor. I had not yet identified that person, but I had time. The protective order gave me time. The contempt hearing gave me leverage. At 2 in the afternoon, I drove to Margaret Chen's house. She lived in a modest bungalow in Pasadena, with a porch lined with potted ferns and a wind chime that sang in the December breeze. She answered the door in a cardigan and slippers, a pair of reading glasses perched on her nose. Catherine, come in. I have the tea on. I followed her into a living room that smelled of cinnamon and old paper. The walls were lined with bookshelves, the shelves packed with law texts and novels in equal measure. A fire crackled in the fireplace. We sat on opposite ends of a worn leather sofa. Margaret poured 2 cups of chamomile. Tell me everything, she said. I did. I told her about the Jane Street account, the Shell LLC, the deposit pattern. I told her about the text messages, the phone calls, the threats. I told her about the mirror value of the check. Margaret listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set down her teacup and folded her hands in her lap. You're holding a nuclear option, Catherine. That tax evasion evidence alone could trigger a criminal investigation that would take years and involve federal agencies. You don't need to use it on Monday. You just need to let Vera know that you have it. I'm not ready to reveal it yet, I said. Good, keep it in reserve. But understand this, once you show that card, the game changes. She will have nothing left to lose. She will attack you with everything she has. I know, Margaret nodded. Then you're ready. She reached into a drawer in the end table and pulled out a manila envelope. I took the liberty of reviewing the case law on contempt for violation of a protective order under Family Code Section 6320. There's a recent ruling from the 2nd District that directly supports your position. I made a copy for you. Give it to Julian. I took the envelope. Thank you, Margaret. Don't thank me. Thank yourself for documenting everything. Most people in your position would have crumpled under the pressure. You built a case. I drove home in the fading afternoon light. The sky was the color of bruised steel, the clouds low and heavy. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a moment, watching the shadows stretch across the lawn. Inside, I went to the office and opened the evidence folder one more time. I had a ritual. I had developed it over the months of preparation. I would review each document in order, from the earliest to the latest, and I would touch each page with my fingertips, as if imprinting the information into my memory through physical contact. I did that now. The first document, a screenshot of a text message from Vera, dated October 2nd, 3 days after Liam's funeral. We need to discuss the life insurance policy. It's a family matter. You don't have a say. The second, a copy of the life insurance policy itself, which I had obtained from the insurance company through a request as a named beneficiary. It was a term policy worth $500,000, issued by a firm I will not name here, with Liam as the insured and me as the primary beneficiary. The policy had a clause that allowed the beneficiary to be changed only with the written consent of the insured. Liam had not changed it. Vera could not have changed it without fraud. The third, a document I had found in Liam's desk tucked behind a drawer liner. A handwritten note in his handwriting dated 2 weeks before his death. Cat, if something happens to me, don't let them take what's yours. I know they'll try. I've seen the way they look at you. But you're stronger than they know. You're smarter than they can imagine. I love you. Liam, I had read that note so many times that the paper was soft at the edges. I set it aside and continued. The fourth document, the check for $48,600. I had calculated the exact amount of every meal, every gift, every expense I had covered for them over 7 years. It came to $48,600, the same number they had written on the check. I had not cashed it because cashing it would have been acceptance of their terms. I had kept it as evidence of their attempt to buy my silence. But I had also kept it as a reminder. They owed me exactly what they had tried to pay me. That kind of symmetry does not happen by accident. It happens because the universe, or the law, or simple mathematics has a way of balancing accounts. I spent Sunday in a state of quiet preparation. I cleaned the house. I did laundry. I made a grocery list I would not use. I answered emails from clients, explaining that I would be unavailable on Monday due to a personal matter. I did not explain further. At 4 in the afternoon, Julian called to confirm that the evidence packet had been received by the court and stamped by the clerk. The hearing was confirmed. Judge Okonkwo would preside. One more thing, Julian said. Vera has retained counsel. A man named Douglas Hartley. He's a former prosecutor who now does high-conflict family law. He's aggressive, but he's not stupid. He'll try to argue that the protective order was obtained improperly, that you falsified evidence, that you're using the court to harass his client. I'm not worried, I said. You should be, but you're prepared. I've seen the evidence. I've worked with Hartley before. He likes to bluff. But bluffing doesn't work against a sealed record and a forensic audio certification. I hung up and went to the kitchen. I made a simple dinner, pasta with olive oil and garlic, a glass of water. I ate slowly, chewing each bite deliberately. At 8 in the evening, I sat in my office with Liam's old iPhone 12 in my hand. I scrolled through the saved voicemails. There were 4. The judge's confirmation, Vera's confession, the message from the sheriff confirming service, and Liam's final voicemail. I listened to Liam's voicemail one last time. Hey, Kat, it's me. I just wanted to say I love you. I know things have been hard with my parents, but don't let them take your peace. Let the law speak for you. You're the smartest person I know. You'll figure it out. I'll see you tonight. I set the phone down. I was ready. And across town in the Delgado family home, Vera Delgado was on the phone with her attorney, arguing that the protective order would be dismissed, that I had no case, that Monday would be a simple victory. She was already composing the email she would send to the family group chat afterward, announcing her triumph and my defeat. She had no idea that I had already sent a copy of the evidence packet to Judge Okonkwo's chambers, and that the judge had called Julian on Saturday afternoon to confirm that she had reviewed it and was prepared to rule. She had no idea that the contempt hearing was not the beginning of a legal battle. It was the end, but I knew. And I let myself smile, just once, in the dark of my office. Then I turned off the light and went to bed, because Monday was coming and I had nothing left to prove. I arrived at the Clara Shortridge Foltz Criminal Justice Center at 7:45 on Monday morning. The building rose from the downtown Los Angeles pavement like a monument to institutional gravity, its concrete facade streaked with decades of rain and exhaust. I parked in a lot 3 blocks away, walked through the metal detectors at the public entrance, and took the elevator to the 2nd floor. Department 2 was a standard courtroom. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, rows of hard wooden benches polished to a dull gleam by the weight of countless defendants. The gallery was empty except for Margaret Chen, who sat in the front row with a legal pad on her lap and a pair of reading glasses perched on her nose. She nodded at me once as I entered. Julian was already at the counsel table, his briefcase open, the evidence packet arranged in neat stacks. He wore a charcoal suit and a tie the color of dried blood. He looked calm. He looked ready. I took a seat in the gallery behind him, 2 rows back. I wanted to see their faces when they walked in. They arrived at 8:43, escorted by their attorney, Douglas Hartley. Hartley was a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a face that had been softened by years of expensive meals. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a case he cared about. Behind him came Vera, Harold, and Trevor. Vera wore a navy blue dress with a gold brooch at the collar. Her hair was pinned back, severe. Her jaw was set. She scanned the courtroom like a general assessing a battlefield. Harold followed 2 steps behind her, his shoulders hunched. He wore a suit that did not fit him well, the jacket pulling at the seams. He looked like a man who had not slept. Trevor brought up the rear, his hands shoved in the pockets of a designer hoodie. He was trying to look bored. He was failing. They sat at the counsel table opposite Julian. Hartley leaned over to whisper to Vera. She nodded once, sharply. I watched her hands. She gripped the edge of the table with her left hand, her knuckles white. Her right hand was pressed flat against the surface, palm down, fingers splayed, a territorial gesture. A claim. I did not look away. At 9:02, the bailiff called the court to order. Judge Linda Okonkwo entered through a side door, her black robe billowing behind her. She was a tall woman in her early 60s, with silver-streaked hair and a face that revealed nothing. She took her seat, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the room. Good morning. We are here for the contempt hearing in the matter of Hale versus Delgado. Counsel, please state your appearances. Julian stood. Julian Torres for the petitioner, Catherine Hale. Hartley rose. Douglas Hartley for the respondents, Vera Delgado, Harold Delgado, and Trevor Delgado. Judge Okonkwo looked down at the file in front of her, the one Julian had submitted on Saturday. She turned a page. She turned another. Then she looked up. I have reviewed the petition and the supporting evidence. I have also reviewed the return of service confirming that the protective order was served on all 3 respondents on the evening of December 7th. The question before this court is whether the respondents have violated the terms of that order by continuing to demand payment from the petitioner. Hartley stepped forward. Your Honor, my clients dispute the validity of the protective order itself. They believe it was obtained through misrepresentation. They were not given adequate opportunity to respond before the ex parte order was granted. Judge Okonkwo held up a hand. Mr. Hartley, the order was granted on November 15th. Your clients were served with the order on December 7th. That is 22 days in which they could have filed a motion to vacate. They did not. The order stands. The question is whether they violated it. Hartley opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. Does the petitioner have evidence of violation? The judge asked. Julian stood. Yes, Your Honor. The petitioner has provided a detailed record of communications from the respondents after the order was served. I have here a compilation of text messages, voicemails, and a written demand for payment delivered to the petitioner's residence on December 8th. He began to read from the record. On December 8th at 9:14 a.m., the petitioner received a text message from the respondent Trevor Delgado, reading, You think you're so smart. My mom is going to destroy you in court. You have no idea what you've started. On December 8th at 9:30 a.m., the petitioner received a voicemail from the respondent Vera Delgado, in which she stated, quote, You think you've won, but you don't understand the system like I do. I know judges, I know lawyers. I know how to make things disappear. Vera's face tightened. She began to speak, but Judge Okonkwo raised a hand. We will hear the evidence, the judge said. Mr. Torres, continue. Julian held up a piece of paper. I also have a physical document delivered to the petitioner's home by courier on December 9th. It is a demand for payment in the amount of $48,600, referencing an alleged debt owed by the petitioner to the respondents. The document includes a check for that amount, made payable to the petitioner, with a memo line reading, Reimbursement for expenses, final settlement. The courtroom became very quiet. Julian walked the document to the clerk's desk. I submit this as evidence. He turned back to the judge. Your Honor, the protective order explicitly prohibits the respondents from making any demands for payment, directly or indirectly. This document is a demand for payment. It is a direct violation. Hartley stood. Your Honor, that document was prepared before the order was served. It was not a violation because it was not delivered with intent to violate. Judge Okonkwo looked at the document. The date on the check is October 3rd. But the delivery date, according to the courier's timestamp, is December 9th. That is after the order was served. The violation is in the delivery. Vera's voice cut through the room. She owes us that money. We have a right to collect. Ms. Delgado, the judge said, her voice cold, you will not speak unless recognized. Mr. Hartley, control your client. I saw Vera's jaw tighten. Her left hand curled into a fist on the table. Judge Okonkwo looked at Julian. Mr. Torres, you have established the violation. Do you have further evidence? I do, Your Honor. Julian reached into his briefcase and pulled out a device I recognized, Liam's old iPhone 12. This phone contains a voicemail left by the respondent Vera Delgado on the day after the petitioner's husband's funeral. In that voicemail, she discusses a plan to fraudulently claim a $500,000 life insurance policy by forging documents to suggest that the petitioner had abandoned her husband before his death. Vera's face drained of color. not white but gray like ash. Harold turned to look at her. He had not known. I could see it in the way his breath caught. The judge nodded. Admit the phone as evidence. We will play the voicemail. Julian handed the phone to the clerk, who connected it to a speaker. The room filled with Vera's voice, preserved in digital amber. Liam, it's your mother. I know you can't hear this, but I need to say it. Harold and I have been thinking about the life insurance policy. That $500,000 is not going to her. She abandoned you long before you died. We can find a way to prove that. I have a friend who can help us with the paperwork. You would understand. You always understood. We'll take care of everything. Don't worry. The voicemail ended. The silence that followed was thick as concrete. Harold's hands were trembling. He had not known. The recognition spread across his face like a slow leak. Vera stared straight ahead, her face a mask of frozen rage. Trevor looked at his mother, and for the first time I saw something like fear in his eyes. Your Honor, Hartley said, his voice strained. The voicemail is disturbing, but it was left before the protective order was granted. It is not evidence of contempt. It is evidence of motive, Judge Okonkwo said, and it is evidence of intent to commit fraud, which is a separate matter. But I am not ruling on that today. Today I am ruling on contempt. She looked down at the stack of documents before her. She turned a page. She looked up. The respondents are in contempt of court for violating the terms of the protective order. The violation is clear, documented, and willful. I am ordering the following. First, the respondents are to pay restitution to the petitioner in the amount of $48,600, representing the full value of the demand they attempted to enforce. Second, the protective order is extended for an additional 24 months. Third, I am referring the evidence of attempted insurance fraud to the district attorney's office for investigation. Vera stood up. This is ridiculous. You can't do this. We have rights. Ms. Delgado, sit down. I will not sit down. This woman has manipulated the system. She has, bailiff. The bailiff stepped forward. Vera looked at him, then back at the judge. She sat. Judge Okonkwo continued as if nothing had happened. The respondents are ordered to surrender any assets held in the separate account at the Glendale Credit Union pending further investigation. Mr. Torres, I assume you have documentation of that account. Julian nodded. I do, Your Honor. Then we are done. The respondents are to comply with the restitution order within 30 days. Mr. Hartley, you may approach the clerk for the written order. I did not celebrate. I did not smile. I sat in the gallery and watched as Vera Delgado was handcuffed by the bailiff for contempt of court. She was led out of the courtroom through a side door, her heels clicking on the tile floor like a metronome counting down. Harold remained seated. He did not move. He looked at the table, his hands clasped in front of him. Trevor had his phone out, scrolling, pretending he was not there. I stood and walked to the counsel table. Julian was packing his briefcase. It's done, he said. Not quite, I said. I turned to Harold. He looked up at me, his eyes were red. I didn't know, he said. About the insurance, about the account, I didn't know. I believed him, but belief is not the same as absolution. You knew enough to stay silent, I said. You knew enough to let her do it. He did not deny it. I left him there with his silence and his complicity and walked out of the courtroom. Margaret met me in the hallway. She did not smile, but her eyes were warm. You did well, she said. You let the law speak. He would have wanted it this way. She nodded. We walked together toward the elevator. The days that followed were a quiet dismantling. The automatic freeze on Vera's separate account went into effect within hours. The district attorney's office opened a preliminary inquiry into the insurance fraud. The check for $48,600 was deposited into my account by court order, the funds transferred from Vera's concealed account. I did not touch the money. I set it aside in a separate account, earmarked for donations to organizations that helped victims of domestic abuse. It felt right. It felt clean. Harold called me 4 days later. His voice was thin, tired. Catherine, I want to apologize. I don't need an apology. I know, but I want to give you one anyway. I should have stopped her. I should have protected Liam. I should have protected you. I was a coward. I said nothing. I'm leaving her, he said. I'm filing for divorce. I can't live with what she did. I can't live with what I let her do. I believed him again. But belief is a gift, not a duty. I hope you find peace, Harold. I hope you do too. I hung up. Trevor did not call. He sent a text message 3 weeks later. This was a mistake. I'm sorry. I did not respond. I saved the screenshot to the evidence folder. I would not need it again, but it felt wrong to delete it. A record of a record, Vera never apologized. She never reached out. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had hired a criminal defense attorney and was fighting the fraud investigation. She would lose. They always lose when the evidence is clean. I moved on. 6 months later, I sat in my new corner office on the 34th floor of a glass tower overlooking the city's skyline. The room was spare and intentional: a mahogany desk, a leather chair, a single framed photo of Liam on a hike in the Santa Monica Mountains. The sun was setting beyond the windows, casting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Liam's old iPhone 12 sat in the top drawer of my desk. I took it out sometimes, when the quiet grew too heavy. I would scroll through the voicemails, listen to his voice, and remember the sound of a man who believed in me, the totem of memory and evidence, the device that held both the voice of the beloved and the voice of the betrayer. I kept it because it reminded me of 5 truths I had learned the hard way. First, hurting people often hide behind familiarity. Vera and Harold were not monsters. They were ordinary people who had learned to weaponize love as a currency of control. The hardest part was accepting that the people who hurt me most were not strangers. They were family, but familiarity is not a license for cruelty. Second, documentation is a shield. Silence is a weapon. I did not scream. I did not accuse. I built a record. Every text message, every voicemail, every check was a brick in a wall that protected me. Silence, strategic silence, was not weakness. It was a trap that others set for themselves. Third, grief can blind you to the greed of others. I spent months in the fog of losing Liam. I did not see how his family was circling, waiting to take what they thought was theirs. Grief is a selective blindness. It shows you only the past, not the present danger. But once the fog lifts, the clarity is devastating. Fourth, the law favors those who prepare. I did not win because I was righteous. I won because I was prepared. I had the evidence. I had the documentation. I had the experts. The law is not a moral arbiter. It is a system that rewards thoroughness. I played the game by the rules, and I won because I learned the rules better than they did. Fifth, you do not need to speak loudly if you speak with proof. The loudest voices in the room are often the weakest. Vera shouted. I whispered. But my whisper was backed by $48,600 in mirrored debt, a sealed voicemail, and a judge who had read my file. Volume is a substitute for evidence. I had the evidence. I looked out at the city, the buildings lit against the darkening sky. A string of headlights moved along the freeway like blood cells through arteries. I touched the frame of Liam's photo. I didn't let them win, I said to no one. The room was quiet. The city hummed below. I picked up my phone and opened a recording app. I spoke into the microphone, a note to myself, a marker of where I had been and where I was going. This is Catherine Hale. I am a forensic accountant. I am a widow. I am a woman who learned that silence is only weakness if you have nothing to say. But if you have proof, silence is a fortress. I stopped the recording. I saved it in the same folder as the others, a record of a life reclaimed. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that they can fight back without raising their voice. If you have ever been told that you owe someone your peace, your time, your money, your dignity, remember this. You do not owe anything to people who confuse familiarity with ownership. Keep your boundaries strong. Guard your peace, and I will see you in the next.